go ahead and get started. We obviously have a very full room and a very full panel. So we're going to try to manage this as well as we can. We want to make sure that we have discussions with the panelists, but also from the audience. So we're going to try to make this as interactive as humanly possible. My name is Teresa Swinehart. I'm with Verizon Communications, and I've been given the task to try to moderate this. What my basic job is going to be to try to keep everybody on time and keep things moving forward. So I'll be the taskmaster on that. Given the panelists, I just wanted to ask everybody to quickly introduce themselves. And then after that, we'll go through a sort of big picture, what the issue's about, and then we'll go into a discussion where we'll just be asking the panelists some questions, but also allow for engagement from the audience. So with that, if I could ask at that end of the table to start just with a brief introduction.
Hi, I'm Shane Tews from VeriSign. I'm the Vice President for Global Public Policy and Government Relations. So we'll be talking about, I'll be looking at it from the pure DNS perspective.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Björn Ludvigsson. I'm with the Crimes Against Children team at Interpol.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chandra Watson, and I'm with the U.S. Federal Trade Commission. I work in the Office of International Affairs, and I work on a lot of different issues, but international privacy and cybersecurity issues as well.
Patrick Feldstrom from Cisco. I'm chair of the Security and Stability Advisory Committee of ICANN.
Hi, I'm Andrei Kolesnikov. I run the .ru and .rf Russian national domains.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Wong, and I'm the director of the Global Internet Freedom Project at the Center for Democracy and Technology. We're a Washington, D.C. based NGO that works on civil liberties issues in the internet. And just a quick plug, I have a paper up here on this issue if anyone's interested.
Hi, I'm Paul Brigner. I'm the Chief Technology Policy Officer for the Motion Picture Association of America. We represent the motion picture studios, Walt Disney, Paramount, Sony, Fox, Universal, and Warner Brothers. And I focus on technology issues, so DNS is one of the major issues I've been focusing on.
Hi, my name is Jason Weil. I'm a principal engineer for standards and policy at Time Warner Cable. Dual role there, so standards development and policy liaison from our technology development organization.
I'm Kudek Lindquist from NetNode. We run 113 DNS root servers and also provide DNS infrastructure for around 30 countries. So we work a lot on the DNS operational side.
I'm Andrei Robachevsky. I work for ISOC as a technology program manager, and I'm one of the organizers of this workshop.
We're going to be logistically challenged, but we'll do our best. Okay, fantastic. With that, I'm actually going to ask Andre to provide the brief overview to provide some background for those who are less familiar with the issue and to sort of frame the discussion, and then we'll go into questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Teresa. Just maybe a short introduction, a kickoff presentation on the background. Next slide, please. So the issue we're going to discuss at this workshop is illegal online content. Click, please. So for the purpose of this workshop, while taking into account that we don't have much time, let's assume that we're talking about illegal content, and there is no dispute that this content is illegal, right? So while we understand there are the very important issues related to, say, freedom of speech, this is outside the scope of this workshop, because otherwise we'll never manage to do this in 90 minutes. It's a serious issue. I think we all acknowledge that impedes creativity, it fosters criminal activity, and damages the internet and reputation of the internet. And there are several options how we can approach this problem, and one is attack at the source of the problem, whatever the source is, or block the consumption of that problem. And we'll discuss both things, I hope. Next slide, please. Well, there are challenges. Otherwise, we wouldn't have this workshop, wouldn't we? There are cross-border issues. For instance, source and consumer may be in different countries, different jurisdictions. And the definition of what is illegal may also differ. Finding a solution is finding a fine balance. It's not straightforward. It's not that easy. Solutions may have implications for privacy and security. They may impact the global internet and its innovative potential. And also they may curtail international principles of rule of law and due process. Well, let me present case in point, DNS filtering, and partly presents ISOC position, and we released a position paper quite recently, and I think some of the materials that attendees of this workshop get include this position paper. So DNS filtering is a proposed technical method to block content consumption. It uses one of the fundamental systems in the internet, which is DNS, domain name system. And well, this approach, it requires modification of DNS data on fly. It requires ISPs to modify answers to the questions. Well, that affects the customers of the ISPs, and it assumes the customers use the ISP's DNS services, which is, well, quite common thing. And well, the attractiveness of this approach is that it can be implemented on a local or national level and within single jurisdiction. Next slide, please. Well, this solution is not without problems. Actually, this solution has a lot of problems. It doesn't solve the actual problem and is easily circumvented. And the downside of this, it drives the service underground. It puts users at risk because some of the circumventions are probably even worse than the problem we're trying to solve. It's incompatible with DNSSEC and impedes DNSSEC deployment. In fact, what is happening if DNSSEC is deployed is that this hack is undistinguishable from a hacker's attack. And it causes collateral damage. I mean, it's too coarse, and DNS has so many dependencies that really it's very difficult to make it so precise that collateral damage can be significantly minimized. And it encourages fragmentation because, well, we're getting different views of DNS and we depart from a global coherence system as DNS should be. And it raises certain human rights and due process concerns. So, well, just a few bullet points on the ISOC position with regards to this issue. We think that unilateral modification of DNS behavior create high security risks. And filtering the global DNS has risks to users and will decrease global security. Filtering DNS doesn't solve the problem. And I think that's probably the main thing that we would like to point out. And policymakers should focus on the most effective ways to solve the problem. In fact, it might create short-term relief, but will leave long-term damage to the internet. And that's also collateral damage that is hard to control. And the cost of DNS filtering from that perspective outweighs possible short-term benefits. And DNS filtering has non-technical implications. Quick and easy technical solutions to non-technical problems may infringe human rights and erode trust in the internet. We think at ISOC that the real solution to combating illegal activities is to attack them at the source through international cooperation. And we understand this is challenging, this is not easy, but this will provide the real solution. International cooperation provides the appropriate avenue for policymakers and the technical community to solve this problem. Well, that was my short introduction, and I apologize I took some time to air ISOC position, but we thought that's important. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Andre. It's obviously a very complex issue, and how to deal with bad actors online is, of course, a challenge that we need to face, and we need to find solutions that work while it doesn't harm the opportunities that exist also for the internet globally. So with that, we're going to go into a series of questions really to trigger a dialogue among the panelists and also the audience and see, are there creative ideas, what's good, what's going on? And with that, I'll kick off the first question, which really is blocking and non-consensual blocking, basically, at the consumption level by technical means, is that effective? You know, that sort of dialogue. So I don't know if anybody would like to respond to that. Okay, we have a couple panelists who are obviously eager. Paul, if you'd like to start.
Thank you. It's Paul Brigner from the Motion Picture Association of America. I think, yes, it can be effective as part of law enforcement scheme to stop copyright infringement and other theft and other bad activities online. You know, when you think about law enforcement, you have to know from the start that there is no 100% effective law enforcement mechanism. There's always going to be circumvention. The hardcore criminals are going to work around whatever law enforcement scheme is in place. But you have to have a mechanism to inform users on the internet that they're doing something that is illegal. And today, there just is not that mechanism. And when, you know, I, of course, focus on movies, and when you can go to a website that looks completely legitimate, and there's, from a user's perspective, there's new websites popping up every day. They give them their credit cards. They think that they're going to a legitimate site and downloading a movie that has been licensed. Well, a lot of those are actually not. They're stolen movies. And we have to have a way to stop that activity. And DNS blocking can be a very effective way to do that.
I think it depends on what you say is effective. What is your definition of effective? Will it stop everyone? No. Will it stop a lot of them? Yes. Will it prevent children from being re-abused by showing their rape on the internet to people again and again that use it for masturbation? Yes. Is that a good result? I think yes. You talk about bad actors, and we have this kind of a mix between copyright infringement. I'm not saying that is less important than what I do with crimes against children, but I think it's important that we keep these things apart. You can have blocking without blocking everything. You can shave without cutting your head off. So, you know, we have the tools in place. You don't have to use them to its full extent. I think blocking on consumption level is effective. I think you can apply national law for the country, and a country's law should apply in that country where people reside. In Interpol, we have a worst off list that is much higher on the scale, so to speak. So we only do the worst or the worst. And this problem is limited. This is not thousands and thousands of websites out there. It's a limited number. It's manageable for police. If we get cooperation from the industry, we can solve the web when it comes to child sexual abuse. Thank you.
Could link to some net note? Yeah. So for the sake of argument, I'll play the devil's advocate. And the best way to achieve what my two colleagues here have just said would, of course, to be block everything and only allow what's legal. And then, in that case, the answer is yes, of course it is very effective. I think the problem, though, is that every nation's laws are different, and what's considered illegal and what is, I mean, we have taken two maybe not so controversial issues, but of course, every nation's law is different, and all issues that we have to block is different. And as someone who runs an operational environment, we have locations that are in 30 different places around the world with very varying legislation. If I were to make sure that filtering on a per country basis only applies to that country and doesn't leak, that is extremely hard, not to say costly. I mean, it's a huge cost towards the end users, and it's a huge cost in the end to you, because the cost that operators have to do has to be borne by someone. And this is a very hard problem to solve, because you can also not leak one country's legislation into another country, because then I, as an operator, assumes the role as the police force, and I start to apply other nations' policing laws onto other citizens, and that's not quite the way the system works today either. And this is very, very hard to avoid.
Thank you. My name is Ben Ako. I'm with the International Institute for Sustainable Development. An uncle of mine used to say that if you shut your eyes when a bad man passes, your eyes would probably remain closed when a good man passes. And so perhaps I'm taking another approach to this, which is that of a devil's advocate, that we could block content, but there may be good content out there, or good people trying to access good content. And I'm speaking about this from a development perspective, coming from most African countries trying to access content online, or people that do business online with sites in the US that may be unable to access content from or banking or financial sites from Africa because of IP blocking and things like that. And so this is an aspect that I think we should also think about and focus a little more on. And there are two stories I probably want to highlight here, and which will bring it down, I think, a lot clearly, because I'm approaching this purely from a research perspective, talking with people in the continent and seeing all the challenges that they face, especially with small business people and entrepreneurs who are looking to build an online internet economy for themselves and for their business. One of the stories is that of a young student that needs to buy books for an upcoming course. He gives his father the reference, who proceeds to the internet to make purchases. He logs onto Amazon.com and completes the check-in process, finds out that his credit card is declined. This is a card he has used only a week ago in the US, while his entire family was on holidays. There's no specific reason why the card should be declined. He knew for sure that it had nothing to do with bank balances because he had sufficient bank balances. Second story is a young West African entrepreneur just launched his online business where subscribers to her news site pay a few cents for access to online content. She tries to access her PayPal account that she'd set up a while back and finds that she's unable to do so. She knows that there should be a lot of revenue generated from the recent surge in requests and downloads from the news site, which has an African CCTLD, which is with an African CCTLD, basically an African domain name, right? But the PayPal account is linked to a foreign account, her foreign bank account. So she has restrictions in trying to purchase anything whatsoever, or even access her account because she's sitting at a place where she's unable to do so. It has economic implications for people that want to invest online. It has economic implications with respect to the online economy, the digital economy that we probably would be talking about if we do talk about here. And I guess that's some angle that we should look at as well. What are the implications in terms of economics for people that want to partake in the global digital economic landscape? Just a few comments now, I suppose.
Very quickly, tweet-length comment. I mean, I think in assessing any strategy for enforcement of law, I think you need to very carefully weigh the benefits against the costs. And here, I think, to respectfully disagree, the benefits, I think, will be quite ephemeral with rapidly diminishing returns. As Andre pointed out, blocking domain lookups doesn't actually remove this kind of illegal content from the internet. The servers that contain them are still there, and I think, especially for users who are very determined to get at this content, actually circumventing the kind of DNS blocking that has been debated in the US and elsewhere is a very minor thing. It requires changing one setting in your computer. And for users who may not be technically sophisticated, I think that there could easily be tools developed or have been developed already to automate that kind of circumvention. So I think that we need to think carefully about whether the benefits are really that lasting.
Thank you. Let's return to the basic. Blocking content is blocking the results of somebody's criminal activity. And I believe that the core question is how to unite different forces to fight the origin of the problem instead of blocking the content for the regular, ordinary, normal people. Also, there is a very interesting phenomenon. Once you start tracking once you start putting the barriers for regular people, you basically marginalize them. You set them up to the gray zone, and with a strong encryption, you basically, if you push harder the internet, the new technology will arise like BitTorrent. You know, remember the story with Kazaa, then it comes a BitTorrent, and then you create the internet basically, which you really cannot control, or the control for this internet will be so costly that there'll be no effective solution for the governments to really track it. And I believe the education and cooperation between the different forces, different agencies in the different countries is a key for this problem. However, should I say that the latest developments in this area reminds me of the Cold War era more and more. that different countries taking the different positions and trying to put these positions against each other. This is really dangerous because it has nothing to do with the internet. At the end, I just read the statement of our Prime Minister. I often read the Freedom House reports that Russia have these certain problems and etc. etc. I should just read it. Putin said that it is always possible to control over the internet. However, the problem lies not with control, but whether or not government has a right to interfere. Today, nothing should be restricted, but one should just operate more efficiently in this area. In addition to child pornography, the internet also contains information about negative political calls, noted Mr. Putin. It is impossible to block it, and one needs just to raise people awareness, shape their internal zero tolerance toward this kind of phenomena. Don't make it complicated. I mean, this is issue of fighting the origin, the criminal, the source of the problem, not the results. I don't believe that there is an efficient way of blocking the content. It can be avoided all the time, as a lot of technicians around this table can say.
I just want to clear up a confusion, I think, among other people. It seems to be that it's either or. Either you block or you do something about it. From the police standpoint, we always do both. We block it to take away the accessibility quickly, and then we work to try to remove the material at source. You have to remember that the people that provide this material and the people that access it are criminals. They have no intention of cooperating with the police. They will not reply to our emails or our calls or our we go to court and we get an injunction against them. It doesn't necessarily help. They are criminals. They're just like any other criminal. What we want to do with blocking, and I'm just going to say this is a relatively small problem. We have 367 domains on our worst off list. That means that those are domains that contain children younger than 13, victims of severe abuse. That is not a big number. Last week, 644,000 new domains came online, and we blocked 367. In any country that has a national list, it's usually less than 1,000. So this is not a huge problem. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater here and say that we can't have blocking because it will destroy the internet. You're techie people. You should be able to find a solution to limit the access to child sexual abuse material on the internet, while at the same time keeping the integrity of the network.
Okay, I'm Michael Roder from the German Internet Association. One of the gentlemen before mentioned development of blocking and filtering technologies. You should bear in mind that whatever technology you develop in this area will and can be used in other countries to oppress civil society because the technology is just the same.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to tee up the next question, which is going to be relevant for the audience and engagement. So let me just frame the question a little bit, and then audience participation, and have a discussion with the panelists. We've heard the technical factors. We've heard the implications across jurisdictional borders. We've heard a little bit about the economic implications and blocking good things versus bad and all of that. So really, what are the short-term and long-term gains and losses, and potential gains and losses, and what are thoughts around that? So panelists, audience, ready?
Hey, I'm Tapani Tarvainen from Electronic Frontier Finland, and I'd like to point out that in many cases the blocking actually makes it difficult to attack the source. It works in two ways, which both have been observed. First, even though the police in principle, of course, is supposed to do both, there have been cases where the police clearly does not bother to do more than block. It's easier to block. And second, the blocking actually helps the criminals as an early warning system. It lets them know that they have been seen, and then they move elsewhere. It's just like police notifying criminals that, hey, we've been seeing you, but we can't be bothered to arrest you yet. So, thank you.
I can get. So nobody from the panel right now? Let me get you first.
I'm not hearing people address the issue of blanket blocking, which Ben brought up earlier, where whole regions have been blocked from accessing commercial activities on the internet because of small amounts of cybercrime relative to the proportion of cybercrime which emanates from other economies which are allowed to continue. This is blanket blocking, and it's a terrible form of, I don't know, exclusion, let us put it that way, of exclusion of whole populations and countries from accessing the net.
Can you define what you're considering blanket blocking? We're not quite clear on what the definition is up here.
I'm talking about the fact that if you are trying to use a credit card which you have established in the US, for example, I have a credit card with my bank in New York, which is legitimate, but I cannot use it from my home in Ghana. I will be blocked from making any commercial purchase because I am coming from a .gh domain. Okay? If you are in Nigeria, it's the same thing. What he was describing is a young entrepreneur using a PayPal account, which is legitimate, but she cannot do business on it because she is working out of Nigeria. So as long as you are a Nigerian citizen living in Nigeria, you're not going to be able to do anything on the net because you have blanket blocking of anybody who is coming with a domain address. When you're accessing and they see the address and it's coming from Nigeria, you'll be blocked.
We obviously have a lively discussion going already, so I'm just going to allow respondents, and we'll start with Kurt, and then we have some panelists who'd like to.
So, just to comment on the blanket blocking, I mean, again, it's hard to do this. If you want to do very fine-grained blocking, it's very hard to do, and you don't even have to have criminal activity. I mean, there's this issue about how to do the blocking. I'm from a tiny island in Scandinavia that has its own country code domain, AX, which is unheard of, which means that people there can't access Facebook and MySpace because they haven't bothered to put this into the geotagging system. Might not be an issue, but it is very technically hard to do this filtering. Let's face it, it's not that easy. And to the people before, it's only 300 domains for your particular problem. But we have people who want to have much broader filtering. We have other issues. We're talking about a filtering in general, and it's actually quite hard. And to the question, what's the short and long-term gains and losses? Well, the short-term gain is that if we only talk about in the entire world, we agree that the only thing we want to filter is 300 domain names. Can we do it? Yeah, of course. But then we have the losses that it's not just about 300 domain names, about all the other illegal content that people want to bring into the discussion. And that's a much, much, much larger problem.
Yeah, so this is Jason Weil, Time Warner Cable, and I guess I'm the only service provider here on the panel. So I'll address my concerns on the question here. So I do think in the short term, the blocking will be effective. My longer concern is, as a provider of services, one of the things I need to provide is a efficient DNS caching server infrastructure, and I am very concerned about if this does keep expanding, and then people like have already been mentioned can easily reprogram their caching resolver to another one outside of the country or something along that nature. There is a concern that I can no longer provide effective DNS services to those customers at this point.
So I would just like to kind of address the technical issues here, and there's been the statement said that this is a very costly and very onerous approach, and I would say that that's, from my knowledge and from most technologists I've spoke to, that's not the case. In fact, DNS systems already have this type of capability built in. It's not something new. It's something been around for a long time. In fact, there was a recent Ofcom report that noted that this is probably the most inexpensive and most expedient way to go about blocking illegal content online, especially when it's matched with a more comprehensive legislative approach using stopping the payment processing and search results, etc. So it can be very effective, and it actually is, from a technical perspective, I would argue, not onerous or difficult.
So to my colleague's point, I do agree that it's not an either-or solution, and I think that addressing illegal content requires a number of different tools in government and corporate toolboxes. But again, I think we really do need to conduct a really sober assessment of the long-term and short-term benefits against the costs. And I'm not just talking about technical costs or rather economic costs, but also the social costs. And I think that the costs of DNS blocking come in several different categories. First is the cost to cybersecurity, and I'm actually going to defer to some of my colleagues on that point, but I think there are some real concerns about how DNS blocking might undermine cybersecurity in the long term. And I think there's also cost to the balkanization of the internet, that it creates this situation where governments will use the DNS system to enforce their local law, which has much more bigger consequences outside of their own jurisdiction. But the point I want to focus on here is the cost to freedom of expression. And I know that this panel isn't about free expression, but I think there are some overbreadth concerns here. You know, domain names are not just about single websites, but they also might host things like email servers or other kinds of services online. And so when you take down or when you block a domain, you may be blocking more than simply just the website that might be selling illegal content, but also things like email servers. And that raises some serious, I think, collateral damage and free speech concerns. We saw one example of another kind of overblocking in the US when the US government seized a domain called moo.com, but that domain actually contained about 80,000 other subdomains. And when you went to any of these subdomains, you were redirected to a site that said, this site has been seized due to child abuse, a child pornography investigation, which is a very serious allegation. And so I think there are some collateral costs, social costs, that we should also take into account.
Since I don't really believe in effective DNS blocking, I'll come back to the blanket blocking and give an example of Russian Federation. About 4 years ago, it was almost impossible to pay by the local credit card for any services outside of Russia, especially in America and Europe. Now it is gone. Sorry to be cynical, but the number of the transactions and the volume of the financial transactions coming from Russia overcome the risks, the financial risks of the banks who fight the fraud. It's number one. Second, actually the local police became working more effective, dealing with the fraud, credit cards, and it's not a politics. It's just a technical and financial issue. Thank you.
I think there are several different things that we're talking about here. First of all, regarding precision. To be able to do effective blocking, if you want to do blocking at all, you need to be precise. And using something higher up the value chain, the higher up the value chain you are, the more unprecise the blocking will be. That's just the fact. So blocking, for example, and also the closer to the source, the better the blocking actually will be effective. So that's why removing the actual content is probably the best blocking you can do, just by removing it. The second thing that I heard a claim that the DNS system already includes support for blocking, that is just completely wrong. What you can do in DNS is that you can claim that you're authoritative for a domain name that you're actually not authoritative for, which means that what you can do is that you can lie, okay? That is something that everyone can do, and that is also one of the reasons why it's quite easy to circumvent the blocking, which also makes it unprecise if you use DNS as a blocking mechanism. This lying is what was pointed out in the introduction, exactly what DNSSEC is actually indicating. And this is one of the reasons, another reason why using the DNS for the blocking mechanism is not effective. So yes, it will be hard to sort of use the DNS to access the content that people are not supposed to access if it is the case that you do things in DNS. But as we pointed out in our report, SAC 50, that the cost, if you do the cost and benefit calculation, you will see as a result that using the DNS is not very effective at all. Regarding the lack of and regarding precision, I also would like to bring up once again the size of the list. If we talked about 300 domain names, that would be one thing, but that is in fact not what is happening in the world. Okay. The last thing I would like to say is that I heard a request that the technical community should work on better tools than DNS blocking, and I will say we are trying to do that. I would like to talk about blocking and how to remove content, but this session, once again, is about the very ineffective tool about DNS blocking. And I ask myself, when should that stop so we can move forward? We're wasting our time.
I would love if you make a new tool. I'm just a provider of content. I'm not a techie person. I'm like a mere mortal policeman. But I do know something about child sexual abuse, so that's why I do it. I can say if this is a child and if it's not. I can say if this is an abuse and what sort of abuse it is, and if it's illegal or not in whatever legislation or whatever criteria that we set. When we look, we only do domains for the Interpol worst off list, so it's only domains. And in contrary to popular belief, perhaps, there's not a lot of mix between legal and illegal content. They will make pure child sexual abuse domains, and they will call them something that is very pure child sexual abusive, and that it would be their trademark or their, how people will find them, because they need to be found. If there is any legal material on the domain, we believe that whoever owns the domain is responsible for the content on that domain. You cannot sell heroin and milk from the same shop and expect that the police will not have an interest in you and close your shop down. Remove the heroin and you can sell your milk as much as you like. I'm one of the people that believe that local law should apply in a country. My law in my country that my people have decided is the rules set for my society are the ones that should also apply on the internet. So I believe in a fragmentation, if you like, of what's legal on the internet, but there should also be some overarching things that we say it's illegal everywhere, and for child abuse that is what we do with this worst off list. If we disagree with whatever a country says is illegal, then we have to attack that government and say we disagree with how you run your country and how you're applying your laws to your people. We shouldn't have to make the internet this cesspool of free things that everyone can access just because there are some countries that would try to limit it. So I urge for, or I advocate for a fragmentation of the internet, if you want, where local law applies to the people and the machines and the networks that reside in that country.
So one of the things that the domain name area, both registries and registrars, have been trying to do for several years is have this conversation that goes kind of up the ladder and down the ladder, because it's what we're dealing with here. We've got technical people, and I absolutely understand and believe what Patrick is saying, and one of the reasons why DNS works as well as it has is because it's a consistent response. You always get the same response. As an end user, you always get the same response. As an end user, if you don't get the same response, you probably think something's wrong with your ISP. So Time Warner has to take a bunch of calls from their customer base, and they don't understand where the problem lies. So we have a multi-layer issue of how do we educate people around this, as well as how do we do the practical application of wanting to be able to block content, and where's the appropriate level to have that. So this is a dialogue I think we'll be continuing to have for quite some time, but needing to understand that you doing it at the wrong level really does cause reverberation within the system, which is a challenge to redesign very quickly around. So I appreciate everybody's point of view on that, but do understand the challenge that the true DNS architects are dealing with. And then, as far as dealing with the challenge of the content, I absolutely understand the compassion of wanting to get it off as fast as possible, but then understanding that if you do it at the wrong level, you may end up taking down somebody's entire system if they're on a multi-tenant server capability, and we're still struggling to figure out how do you do that. And a lot of that's education, is the person who's requesting that the takedown happen, that they understand enough about the system to request it at the right level, so you're very pinpoint directed at what you're trying to do.
Thank you, Ben Ako. You raised a some important points around costs, around economics, technical, financial. I think those are very key points that we need to perhaps pay attention to in the short and long term. I would add to your points in those directions, in that direction, and maybe prefix it with an example of, or rather a comment that someone had said, that the financial institutions like MasterCard and visas exist in these countries and do good business in these countries where they are mostly restricted. All right, so there must be a reason why they're still remaining in those countries. And that's economies of scale that you're talking about, right? Which in this case, the small businesses that they are engaged in far outweigh the risks that they, would probably be faced with. But that in the short term may be advantageous to them. In the longer term, though, that doesn't work because you want to expand your business to a much larger number of people. The implications, therefore, is that within the short term, it has implications on the economies in the country. But I think another point I want to raise is the long-term cost of development, and that is that if the lifeblood of societies, economies, financial transactions is restricted in such form, what sort of implication does that have on the long-term development? And I think there are lots of implications here because people would not have access to funds. We see a different Kenya today because of the alternative forms of financial transactions that have provided access to people in places where they ordinarily wouldn't be able to have them. Now, in a case you would argue for innovation, right, as a means of counteracting what may have been restrictions in this area. But what the truth of the matter is, Safaricom and its financiers would not be able to transact business internationally. And we need to look at that longer term implication. Finally, I think that we may be talking, and this is more from an economic perspective, we may be talking amongst ourselves and maybe preaching to ourselves. I think everybody on the panel seems to agree that DNS blocking is not the way to go. But people that should be here, that are not here at the financial institutions, given the multi-stakeholder nature of the IGF, how can we bring these people to the table with the guys at Interpol? I'm not sure whether they talked to them already. I'm sure with money laundering, yes. But within the internet economy, that's a totally new place. And I'd like to hear from you what you think about this economy as it relates to financial transactions down to the individual level. Thanks.
This is Shahram from the Iranian ICT Guild organization, the main NGO addressing private sector ICT activities in Iran. Actually, regarding the question, I want to bring up one of the direct impacts of strict blocking of the in the internet. When I say blocking, I mean also containing filtering systems too. I think always there is a way to bypass this blocking, and by doing this, we are just stimulating the people and the communities to find out those bypassing techniques. We are just starting some kind of procedure that goes on, and we just try to find better blocking systems, and then we find better bypassing systems, and I think it will not resolve the problem. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Constance Berger from Ministry of the Interior in Germany, and I want to introduce about our experiences we did in that theme, because I think child pornography is also a big theme we have to fight against. And in Germany was implemented the Act of Impede Access to Child Pornography in 2010, and before applying this act for a year, Germany initially did not block access to websites, but actively removed child pornography sites from the web. And during this year, the success and effectiveness of deleting child pornography from the net was evaluated. And we had a success, a colleague of mine told me, from 98% in 2 weeks. I think this is very a good success. I have to mention there's no intervention from public authorities in the internet. The Federal Criminal Police request the content providers to delete the content and checks after a time. The providers remove the content, and this process works. We're working together with InHope and other non-governmental organizations. So, for instance, the colleague of ECHO is here, and could you explain some technical details if you are interested in? Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Cute with Public Interest Registry. We're the operator of .org. What I'd like to hear more, and I think the problem's been framed very well, I believe there's problems with blocking. I believe that violations of intellectual property rights should be addressed. I believe criminal activity should be addressed on the internet. But beyond framing the problem, how are we as industry and civil society going to coordinate better and more effectively with governments on these issues within the context of the multi-stakeholder model? I think that's really the discussion we need to be having above all else. There's registries, there's registrars, there's ISPs, there's web hosting providers, there's payment service providers. One of the challenges is we don't all gather together under the same tent regularly. Registries and registrars and some ISPs are at ICANN, and other service providers are gathering in associations or within their national jurisdictions where they offer service, but this is a fundamental challenge for us. So what I'd like to hear is people's thoughts about how can we, and I put the impetus on industry and civil society here, how can we coordinate better with governments? What can we do within the multi-stakeholder model to come together on this? I mean, clearly there's some division from the intellectual property side of the community and the operator side of the community on these questions right now, but we need to get beyond just framing the problem.
Thank you. My name is Sebastian Orwengabo from the Singapore Internet Research Center. I think my observation is that we have now the contest between legal and legitimate business and illegal and illegitimate business. So the cybercrime we are talking about, that we are trying to fight, to block, to do, is a form of business in itself. It's an economy going on out there. I think then the solution lies first in identifying which one is legal and legitimate, and this is still a multi-stakeholder process. And then how do we handle the illegal and the illegitimate, again using a multi-stakeholder process. Someone observed that the technologies we are trying to develop, we should be aware that they can be used for both bad and good purposes. I think if we had deeper collaboration, cooperation, and partnerships between governments, businesses, and the scientific communities, investing their energies, resources, and time in research, in innovation, so that at least they can be able to be ahead of these illegal and illegitimate innovators. They are also researching, innovating, and developing technologies to use in their criminal activities. But at least we need to be ahead of them. That's one way to go about it. The other way is that with this deep collaboration and cooperation, then it may be possible through continuous interaction as we are doing between the government, business, and the scientific community to really know that, to keep updating ourselves about the possibilities and the emerging criminal activities, the dynamics they are taking, so that in the long run, it is possible to make it more difficult for these criminals to sustain their criminal activities when we have collaborative approach than doing it ad hoc, because you will find many governments don't run as fast, both in innovation, in acquisition of skills, as the businesses do. Thank you.
There we go. Thank you. I think this has been a wonderful teeing up for a next phase of an important dialogue. Andre has a few comments to make, and then we'll be posing some questions to go into that direction.
Yeah, I think it's very important that to remind that about 3 years ago at the IGF, everyone basically agreed that there is absolute evil, which is child pornography. I mean, there is no defragmentation of the internet over this issue. And the colleague from Germany gave us a nice example about the InHope. The InHope initiative is actually the good sample for other issues, we can take, we can use it as an example because it works. Just talking about Russia, there's about 5,000 tickets per month opened over the child pornography, and about 900 of them resulted in a real action of putting it down. And it works. It works through the borders. It doesn't involve the governments. You don't have to run to your president asking the permission to put down, the child pornography. You can do it by yourself, and it's an issue of the local civil society and internet community. And but that's an issue. I mean, everybody agreed that it's evil. Over the other issues, there will be a problem because different nations understand this criminal and non-criminal differently.
We're going to have Andre, and then we'll do the next.
Yeah, I'm another Andre. I'm actually Andrei Robachevsky. So I think we're naturally segue into the next part of our discussion, where we want to concentrate on the solution to the problem. And it's important to understand what the problem is. And the problem is not so much that content is accessible, but that content exists. And many things that we discussed now in this debate, they remind me of curing a disease with painkillers. Right, so now we want to have more discussion on this dialogue and finding avenues and finding solutions to the real problem of bad actors and illegal content on the internet. And I would like to maybe flip one or two slides, just to, yeah, is it no, once more? Yeah, right. Okay, so.
Okay, so just to tee this up, we've heard references to toolboxes, we've heard references to where things might be most effective. We've heard references to social and economic impacts. And we've heard references to coordination and cooperations among civil society, governments, businesses to try to achieve results. So what might be some public-private international cooperations with existing tools, or are there other tools that might be worth considering? And how do we build on the discussions that are here? The gentleman over there, and then I'll go to the panel, and then back to the audience.
Thank you. My name is Adrian Dwyer, and I'm the Executive Director of InHope. InHope represents 40 national hotlines around the world, all receiving and dealing with reports of mainly child pornography or images of child sexual abuse. Now, they all work within their own national set protocols and have their own set agreements with industry and law enforcement. And in fact, to be a member of InHope, you have to have very strong relations with industry, law enforcement and government to actually become an InHope hotline. InHope have members who do deploy blocking and filtering in their country. Some members actually are involved in the compilation of the lists which are used to block and filter. We also have members, hotlines from various countries which are very opposed to that view. InHope themselves stance is that we support anybody who takes whichever action within their own country and their own procedures in order to assist in the removal of this material and restrict access. So we represent hotlines which deal with blocking and filtering and those which are opposed. So we cover the whole remit. But certainly as InHope, we are an international tool which is used to pass reports of illegal content or possibly illegal content swiftly from hotline to hotline or nation to nation in order that it can be dealt with locally and as swiftly as possible. So that's basically the InHope network and how we fit into this situation here.
Very much. To the panelists, yes.
Hi, this is Chandra Watson with the FTC, although I should note that these are my own views, not those of the Commission. And also I noticed on the transcript that the last time that Cynthia spoke, it said my name, so this is my first comment. But I'm glad that the question was asked, and this is really the area where the FTC has really focused its approach on its enforcement efforts, particularly public-private cooperation and international cooperation is something that we've worked on extensively, and looking at prevention and encouraging industry stakeholders to adopt practices that limit the risk to consumers. We've looked at public-private international cooperation in the context of actual enforcement proceedings and investigations, and how we can collaborate in terms of sharing of evidence, particularly not just from industry, but from academia and other government agencies, particularly in our sort of quote-unquote high-tech cases where we do have to rely on the expertise of others in this area. And also a big part of our effort here is consumer awareness campaigns. So these are sort of just some approaches that we haven't discussed during this panel yet, but these are sort of other mechanisms at getting at bad actors on the internet. And just in terms of public-private cooperation, we've done a lot in this area, and I think someone mentioned one of the real challenges here is identifying all of the relevant stakeholders to ensure that we're really developing comprehensive approaches to having everyone in the same room. So everyone in the internet ecosystem. And we've worked a lot with domain name registrars and registries. There's always a lot of focus on ISPs, and someone mentioned the financial sector, which may not necessarily be represented here, but they're represented elsewhere. But we need to engage like domain name resellers and basically everyone who has a stake in this issue. And I think one of the challenges is that we have these discussions with some of the relevant people, but not necessarily all of the relevant people at the same time. And that's just on the private sector, and that also applies in the government or in the public sector as well. So for example, I am with a consumer protection agency in the United States, and we work a lot with our other foreign counterparts who work on consumer protection and privacy issues around the globe. Well, we also in the US have a very cooperative relationship with our criminal counterparts because we don't have criminal jurisdiction. And I'm not sure that that's the case around the globe, and I've been to conferences where they are working on cybercrime issues, and I've been to consumer protection conferences, and we're all talking about the same thing. And so we just should ensure that everyone who has a stake, whether it's from the public or private sector, that we're all in the same room talking about these issues. And likewise, I think there are a lot of different fora where we are discussing these things, which is great, but I think one of the things we might want to do is just take an inventory of ongoing efforts, because in my experience, in some cases, there is duplication of effort, and some of it is regional. So last year I attended the first West African Cybercrime Conference, and that was great, and there was a lot of good discussion, and I thought, wow, these were the issues that we discussed in Strasbourg at the Council of Europe Cybercrime Conference. And these are issues that we discussed in Washington at something else I attended. Wouldn't it be great if we were all together developing a comprehensive solution to these issues? And I've also been in situations where there's been reluctance expressed both on the public sector and the private sector. There were some, in a global setting, some foreign government agencies who were more reluctant to cooperate with industry in their country because they were afraid of the perception that they would appear to be cozy with a particular company that they were supposed to be regulating. And on the business side, I've heard comments saying, well, you know, this doesn't affect our bottom line, so it's not our interest. But I think we sort of need to move away from those things. And at the FTC, we cooperate all the time with industry, and we have workshops because we sort of follow this multi-stakeholder process, but at the same time, we still enforce our laws effectively. So, and one other thing I'll just say is I think it's important for us to have this dialogue between the public and private sector, because we really need to understand how the other entity works. So for law enforcement agencies, you know, we might have a request for information, but we don't really understand the cost we may not understand the cost of the company of producing the information, the time to produce it, or the burden on that particular entity. And that entity, I've heard people say, okay, well, we'll produce the information, but we want to know all of the particulars of your investigation as to why we should produce it. Well, in the law enforcement context, and many times that's non-public information that we're really not authorized to share. And so that's not necessarily always a reasonable request. But I think that if we can discuss these issues, then we can talk about what sort of requests would be considered reasonable and what information is necessary and relevant from the law enforcement agency. So just a couple of issues.
Thank you. In my experience, a lot of these public-private corporations, they work very well. It may be because I work in child sexual abuse, which is the easiest way to get people to help you. It is something that everybody thinks is bad. And answering your question from before with the financial coalition, we have worked with them for many, many years, and now there is no commercial child exploitation material on the internet like it used to be like 3-4 years ago, where you would punch in your credit card and you would get access to 10 gigabytes of abuse material instantly. That doesn't exist anymore. So that whole payment method has been taken out, having reduced commercial child exploitation online, or at least on the web, greatly. We don't see these, we used to have cases with 60,000 customers worldwide, taking down one group of criminals, giving access to the 60,000 customers with legitimate credit cards being punched in and getting access to it, and it drowns the police with cases, and that is basically our biggest problem. We have too much cases to do, and there are only 3 things that the police don't have enough of, and it's money, people, and time. So we need to reduce it, and for us, having systems like blocking, preventing crime is always cheaper than investigating it. If there's, excuse me, if there's no crime being committed, we don't have to spend money investigating it. And then on the prevention part, having a blocking system like we do, we always tell people that they have been blocked. We don't put them into a black hole and pretend that the service doesn't work. We will say that this happened, you have been redirected, these are the reasons why. This is what you can do to complain about it. This is what you can do to report about it, and we'll link to the InHope, for instance, from this stop page that we call it. It gives the police a presence on the internet. It tells them that the internet is not a lawless zone that you can do whatever you want. You may be watched, you may be seen, you may be even investigated and tried in the end for whatever crime you commit there. It's like when you see a police car going down the highway, you look at your speedometer, you check that your seatbelt is on, your lights are on, is everything okay? You throw the cell phone in the back seat. This is what we do. We just tell them that there is a chance that you may get caught. When the police car goes off the road, you can still speed. It's still possible to speed, but you may choose not to do that, and you chose not to do that while you saw the police being present. We are, at Interpol, we are working with the likes of ICANN. We are now trying to get into the GAC, the Government Advisory Board, the committee, to have a voice there to say, well, for law enforcement, this is a problem. You need to think about this when you do these rules for registrars and registries. And of course, we would like to go up the food chain all the way up and say, let's take out this domain at its root, just nip the butt of it, so to speak. That would be good for us if we could find a way to do that is transparent, that is accountable, and that everyone can live with. Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to add one thing. I did want to highlight a successful example of public-private international cooperation. So in Paris in October, the London Action Plan, which is a global public-private enforcement network that the FTC has been very active in over the last several years, and several other of our counterparts around the globe, they are having a joint conference with MOG, which is the Messaging Anti-Abuse Working Group and Industry Association, to discuss cybersecurity issues and public-private cooperation. And in addition, it's basically a week-long activity, and so the London Action Plan is going to meet with the OECD's Committee on Consumer Policy to discuss their 2006 recommendation on enforcement cooperation on spam issues and some of the issues that are really important to us. And there are some other, there's the EU's Consumer Protection Cooperation Network, which is an EU-wide consumer protection network based on an EU regulation. But that group will also be meeting with all of the entities that I just described, also focusing on cooperation on internet consumer protection issues. But in any event, there are a host of organizations that work on these issues that will be focusing on public-private international cooperation in Paris in October. So this is just one of many examples where it actually is happening.
Thank you. A comment on what you just stated on showing a web page. I don't see the connection between showing a web page or not for people using web service to be able to access information and do DNS blocking. When I'm saying DNS blocking is very ineffective and should not be done, I'm not saying that you should not display the web page to people. Okay? And I do not understand why we are connecting the two with each other. That's the first thing. The second thing is that a lot of that from a human rights perspective, I don't really know if we have any I think human rights people are actually in a different session at the same time, which is kind of interesting. But I've been working with the Swedish Foreign Ministry quite a lot regarding, and Frank LaRue, the UN Special Rapporteur on freedom of expression on the internet. And one of the things that the Swedish position that was also signed up by 40 countries in the Human Rights Council in June this year said very explicitly that of course law enforcement and other kind of functions must of course get the tools they need, but we also have to take into account the impact it has on the ability for people to actually live up to the human rights. So when talking about, so that is also something that needs to be taken into account when calculating the cost and balance. But once again, I don't see the connection between blocking and DNS. That is what I'm saying is ineffective. I'm not saying we should not display web pages to people when they are accessing something using a web service.
Yeah, just separating the numbers. Separating the number out of the 5,000 calls for the child pornography, there are only 100 individual domains, and if it goes down, it goes about 10 in the national domain name zone. This is not the DNS is not an issue. The content should be blocked on the, on a different level, of course. It's social networks and cloud computing, and you know what I mean.
Thanks. I just wanted to, first of all, fully acknowledge the very real challenges that law enforcement is facing. I mean, this is a really pernicious problem, child abuse images and the criminal networks that promote it, and I want to fully acknowledge that, and also acknowledge the challenges for companies who are really trying to enforce their intellectual property. So in the spirit, I think, of offering constructive solutions, one of the things that we've discussed in the US as an alternative, or at least maybe a first step before we go down the road of DNS blocking, is the idea of enlisting the help of financial and advertising intermediaries, so the credit card companies, the ad networks, and the intermediaries that allow payment online, who may or may not knowingly or unknowingly be doing business with sites that are selling illegal content. Focusing on these intermediaries don't really raise the same kind of security or overbreadth concerns that the DNS system does raise. And on the other hand, focusing on the source of money for these sites, the source of their profits, could actually be even quite effective, I think. Of course, I think we need to think about some of the unintended consequences of this approach, and to really build in fair process and all of that to address the kinds of blanket blocking that we were discussing earlier, but it's another thing I think to consider as part of the toolkit.
Yeah, this is very quickly, and I think I want to place an emphasis on the platform such as the IGF offers, that it's a useful platform to have this sort of conversation, especially financial institutions that are directly involved in what we're talking about. And the fact remains that up until now, when we engage financial institutions, we rather engage financial institutions that are in the field of technical service provision, as opposed to the actual financial institutions that should be doing the work, that actually do work within the sector. So banking, insurance firms, for instance, are people that we want to directly link with and bring them to the table in order to provide these sort of solutions. I know we have alluded to many individual regional initiatives that have taken place in the West and in North America. I happen to live there now, and I understand how it works in those contexts. But having originated from a context where, from a development context where this is important, I think financial institutions should also wear the hat of development from this side of the globe to see how we can bring solutions to this. And so if we're talking about financial institutions that need to come to the table, which financial institutions are we talking to, and where are they located? And how can we bring a broad sector of financial institutions to the table to find solutions to this?
A very nice, helpful segue both to the audience participation, but also in our discussion to think about what venues exist, what venues can be used in different ways, what venues could cooperate with each other as part of this discussion. To the lady, and then I have the lady over there, and then the gentleman here. And is there anybody else in the audience?
And can we move to another slide, please? Next slide.
Louise Bennett, BCS. I'm very aware that the blocking of child pornography has been pretty successful, but we shouldn't fool ourselves that this has stopped child pornography. It has simply moved to social media. Certainly that's our experience in the UK. I myself work in fraud a lot, and you stop one type of fraud and fraudsters still exist and money is still there to be gained. They move somewhere else. I think what we have to recognize is that the internet gives an unprecedented scale, speed, and low cost of entry for all sorts of criminal activities. And it's extremely difficult for bureaucracies, particularly international bureaucracies, to have the agility to deal with that. So I think one of the key questions the IGF should be asking itself is how can they move more quickly to solve these types of very difficult problems, because they pop up somewhere else and you've got to deal, as several people have said, with the source.
Thank you. Kasia Szymielewicz, Panoptykon Foundation, Poland. I hope we are human rights defenders, so I can give you the perspective for human rights approach. Together with Internet Society, we did a lot of work in Poland to prevent the law on internet blocking over the last 2 years. We got to the point when we really had regular meetings with the government to think about the alternatives. Of course, we criticize blocking for the reasons mentioned here, and we do say that the removal is possible and the removal is the way forward. And the main counter-argument we always hear from the government is, well, we would like to remove, but there is no interstate cooperation. The police from Russia, the police from other countries does not react. We have voices saying this is not true, but still they say so. We respond saying, well, there is international cooperation, like we have the community here and internet-related structures. And then we hear a very good counter-argument, which I would like to pose here for discussions. Well, what is legitimacy of this? I mean, if we have public-private cooperation, not including judges, not including police, or including police which is not skilled or comes from the countries which we do not trust for their rule of law, well, how we deal with this? Can we really take the risk that we remove content without any legitimacy behind that action? Would that be really a viable alternative to blocking, or we end up having exactly the same problem? So that's my actually question to you, to our panelists. What sort of checks and balances could we imagine here, and what agents would be legitimate agents? I cannot think about ICANN myself. I can probably think about ISPs and registrars, but only after some kind of legitimate decision has been taken by the court, or at least on the police level. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Andrei Sherbovich from Russian Federation, maybe the third Andrei in the auditorium. I'd like to say that some comments. At first, according to the public opinion of the users of the internet, majority of users are against any kind of efforts for blocking. Any news concerning new initiatives for blocking are facing with some problems with the negative reaction of user auditorium. So I'd like to stress some major points. According to my opinion, there is no crimes which could be committed completely online. All the crimes are made in the real life and then come to the online sphere, or otherwise they are planning online and committing in the real life. So there are some examples. For example, in Egypt, we are not given a political situation there, but during the revolution it's not excluded. Then people who murdered in Cairo Museum also agreed with the internet. with the social networking. Also in England, when it was social protest in summer, people are doing sell of the robbed stuff through the websites. That's the first point. The second point, that's why blocking could prevent real crimes committing with the issues of the internet, with the websites. Personally, I could welcome all the initiatives for improving blocking mechanisms, both technical and political. Also, I'd like to say that machinery blocking, automatic blocking by using the software, special software, is not effective. For example, my machinery antivirus software, internet security blocking website of the conference against child pornography because of the wording child pornography there. So it's better to improve political measures together with technical issues for effective combating crimes committed with the internet. Thank you very much.
I actually have a comment on the topic. I think we have good examples of international best practice when we have issues that need to be addressed internationally and where we want countries to sign up. You have within the UN framework an international convention that countries will sign up to, and you negotiate the terms of the international convention. For example, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. You have technical reviews from time to time to check and track progress. So I think this is one area where we need to have such a mechanism that will allow countries to have clearly defined what they are signing up to, and then we will track which countries have actually signed up to that international convention on how we are going to control internet in terms of these criminal type of issues. Because I think we have to be very clear on what is criminal and what everybody is going to recognize as criminal, and where we have some of the freedom of association and freedom of speech and human rights issues that our colleague from Russia just came up with, which can be interpreted on a national level. So I think that really gets into how we're going to develop solutions. Now, the absence of the financial partners here makes it difficult for us to know which fora in which to negotiate. But just as an economist and logically, since I think the bulk of credit card market, we know who the major players are, I think these can be engaged with, and we just have to find where they meet together, you know, and to talk to them about some of those issues. But definitely, our colleague from the US mentioned how you can pull together those different groups in the US, Europe, and Africa together to discuss this kind of thing. It shouldn't be too difficult to pull together something like that, and this can be a very concrete outcome of this particular workshop. So thanks.
Hi, my name is Grady Johnson. I'm with the Association for Progressive Communications, and my project is actually literally called Internet Rights are Human Rights. So there are a few of us in the room, human rights defenders. And I think that the debate here so far, it has been good, but I think we are glossing over, with one of our assumptions is very dangerous. I think we need to make a distinction between different forms of illegal content. The like child pornography and media piracy do not warrant the same type of response. We have to always consider the costs and the benefits with what we're trying to deal with. No one would argue that child pornography is a terribly heinous crime, and it warrants perhaps much more extreme responses than other types of illegal activity. And just a final thing to consider is a very important legal principle, and that is that extreme cases don't make for good laws. So we should not be basing our policies and our legal approaches around really extreme things like child pornography. I think that always has to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis and should not be the foundation of how we approach these problems.
Thank you. You've actually, nice segue, thank you. So I'm going to, in light of time and in light of the debate right here, give the opportunity for all the panelists to make some closing observations, but really a focus on what we might want to consider also as next steps. We've heard about, different tools, different forums, different cooperations. Obviously, there's no question one has to deal with bad actors online. There's national laws. There's illegal activities. There are problems. We need to find solutions towards those that work across the board. So with that, I'd like to give the panelists an opportunity for the closing remarks, but really focusing on what the takeaways are, what the next steps might be, where some partnerships might be. So with that, I'm going to start on this side, just a heads up. If somebody's not ready, then I'll jump ahead. You go first, sorry.
All right. So I think my takeaway is really that we need to look at the bigger picture, and we need to not only consider consumer and source of the content, but the whole food chain, right? And bring them all together and discuss this issue comprehensively. That is the only way we can find solution. I think we also need to make international cooperation more visible and more emphasize the role of this cooperation. And I really hope that we can move from this kind of painkillers, because painkillers, well, they may stop working at some time if taken for a long time, or they may kill if you take too many of them.
So yeah, I'm Chris Lindquist from Network again. I think that one of the takeaways I have from here is that we have the DNS blocking hammer, and everything has looked like a DNS blocking nail, and maybe it isn't. And to follow up to the gentleman from Interpol, is if what the police forces are missing is time, people, and money, DNS blocking isn't one of those three. Maybe we should give you the tools you need to enforce the laws. I think that we said here before, this is not necessarily a technical problem. I think we need to as also Andre said, go look at the bigger picture and the bigger implications on what we can do for this, and not just focus and go to the root of the problem, as several people mentioned, the other intermediaries, not just the telcos, but also the financial institutions, the hosting sites, etc. There's a lot more here than just going for the intermediaries, which is actually a very bad way of doing this.
I guess I'll just stress the what has already been said before, that going after the financial institutions, and that's currently what a bill that's going through these states in the U.S. government is I think that's one of the better parts of that bill, is that it's definitely going after the money that's financing these things. So that should continue happening. The DNS blocking seems more of a unilateral response, and I think if we had a multilateral agreement, or if we work toward a multilateral agreement, there would be new technologies that would come out, or agreement that we could just go after the source of the problem, and we wouldn't need some of the whack-a-mole requirements that currently exist. But right now, it's the only thing that does exist. So.
I would just like to point out that it's in all of our interest here to stop this illegal activity and help the internet become a very vibrant marketplace for content and other commerce, and to stop child pornography, of course, and all of the really bad things that are happening there. And as part of a reasoned approach, DNS filtering does make sense. It doesn't break the internet if it's done in a reasonable way. It doesn't fragment the internet. It stops access to illegal content. You just have to, I think, look at it from that perspective, and look at it from a very reasonable perspective. And it's a very exciting time for the film industry, the movie industry, what I focus on, because as you probably all see the headlines on a weekly basis, there's new distribution schemes that are rolling out almost, it seems, every day. Very exciting developments and content coming online, and people are enjoying it. So I think we need to the more we stop the illegal access, we're going to see more and more of the legal content becoming available, and it's going to create a very virtuous circle.
So just to reemphasize a few of my points, I completely agree that combating online infringement, combating illegal activity, and child abuse are very worthy goals. But I think with any good policy-making process, we do really need to conduct a sober assessment of the potential benefits against the potential costs, whether they are economic or social costs, and whether they are intended costs or not. And I think that under this kind of analysis, DNS blocking is perhaps not the best way to go in terms of cost-benefit analysis. I think to the extent possible, we really do need to focus on the bad actors themselves, whether we're talking about purveyors of copyright infringement or purveyors of child abuse material. And I think that because these are cross-border issues, we really need to be very creative in thinking through all the different tools in our respective toolkits.
Internet is not a special thing, it's part of our lives, and crime existed 5 years ago and will exist the next 1,000. I mean, we can only just manage the level of crime. And since the internet brings the only thing is that our community became international. There's no, blurred geographical borders between the nations. And so in this schema, I think that cooperation between different civil societies and organizations and businesses work much more efficient and faster than agreement between the governments. This is just observation. I mean, it's not my personal conclusion. This is facts we all see. So I think the focus should be on horizontal cooperation and horizontal line between the different organizations involved somehow in the internet business. And also DNS hammer is not, I mean, I really believe it's not an efficient way.
So to summarize what I think already said is that yes, that interrupting the ability for people to access content is of course something that a problem that we need to work with. DNS is not the tool that you should use. The only time I can see DNS blocking happening is, for example, what happened a few hours ago when a domain name in the Czech top-level domain was blocked, but that was just because it was illegal use of the domain name itself, not what it referred to. Okay. The other thing is that blocking in DNS is not stopping the ability to access the content. It stops the ability to access the content using that specific domain name, and we cannot continue to just be sloppy with the wording. Thank you.
I think my final takeaway is a little redundant, I think, of what Andre and part of what Cynthia said, which is basically just developing comprehensive solutions among all stakeholders and exploring what other tools we have in our toolbox to go after bad actors on the internet, and also making international cooperation not just necessarily more visible but more effective, because there's a lot of work going on, but I don't think that, I think there is some duplication of effort, and I think that our efforts could be more effective in this regard.
Thank you. I'm going to try to be very quick. I'm just going to say one thing first. When we speak about this topic, a lot of you use the word child pornography. I looked up pornography on Merriam-Webster yesterday, and it means material that is intended to cause sexual excitement. This is something you should think about when you speak. Pornography is okay for many countries. A lot of people use it. When we talk about child sexual abuse and the rape of children and pictures of that and people using that for their own sexual gratification, that is not pornography. It is pornography to them, the ones that masturbate. It's not pornography to the rest of us, just so you take a note of that. I'm not technology driven. I don't care what kind of technology you use. I just think that if DNS doesn't work, fine. Find something else that does work. I will provide you with whatever I believe from my standpoint is should be taken off the internet. And you fix the rest. You fix the technical parts. And I'm going to say one thing for Africa, for this country, for instance, for Kenya, that when you don't have the same type of internet saturation that we have in many of our other countries, where we, in fact, have a kind of a broken internet, you need to build an internet that works from the bottom up. You have to implement the things that we need as law enforcement, that you need as technical people. You have to kind of think of these things from the beginning rather than implementing it as time goes by. We now have a band-aid internet. and it's held together by strings and rubber bands. And you need to think about that when you design your system, your infrastructure from the ground up, so to speak. Thank you.
I think we need to continue to educate at every level. This reminds me of the economic street lamp idea that you always look for your car keys where there's light, even though you might not have been near that light any time during that evening. So I think we've kind of hit the simple solutions, what feel like simple solutions, and we need to delve a little further into the complexity of the issue and realize it's a multi-layered problem that we will probably have to solve at multiple levels, and DNS blocking was probably a simple, quick, felt good solution, but we need to continue to see how we do this and allow it to happen for the multi-user, multinational concerns that we have in the room.
I'm tempted to say that a technical solution may not necessarily be the answer or provide an answer to a social problem. But I think by that I'll be opening up a can of worms. I'm not sure I want to do that. But 2 or 3 things that come up for me. A couple of things that come up for me is that the existing global dialogue on cybersecurity and content blocking, I think has been in the favor of the West. And it's more in tandem with protecting Western interests that may not necessarily reflect on the economic growth and development of developing countries. So I think that's an important point that I'm taking away from this. The second thing that I probably am taking from here is that there are better ways that we could begin to think about finding a solution to identifying criminals online. And I think there's a lot more research that is required in the area. It may take place in a technical perspective, but it cannot be done alone within the technical dimension. I think there are a lot more answers to the problem from social, cultural, and economic perspectives. Thank you.
Logistics. So we've had a fantastic discussion, very useful, some I think very good ideas and suggestions coming out, and hopefully either bilaterally or together among the different participants there might be further dialogues either at this event or in the future. And with that I just want to thank the panelists and the audience and being so efficient that we're actually finishing a little bit early so folks can get to lunch in time and go to the next meeting. So with that, a round of applause to everybody. Thank you.